What if some of the most dramatic UFO sightings never happened on a lonely back road, but hundreds of miles above Earth, reported by the very people humanity trusts to tell us what's real in space? Strap in, because tonight we're cracking open first-hand astronaut encounters NASA quietly filed away. These are the moments when seasoned spacefarers glanced outside the hatch and saw something that absolutely shouldn't be there, and then got radio silence when they asked HQ what was going on. Forget grainy cell phone videos and anonymous tips. The wildest UFO stories come from astronauts who had the best seats in the universe. These are pros with PhDs and thousands of flight hours suddenly whispering about glowing orbs and impossible maneuvers just outside their cockpit windows. NASA's official response? Usually a shrug or a technical glitch. Let's dive into real incidents that keep mission control sweating to this day. Picture streaking around the planet at 17,000 miles per hour and realizing something is pacing you. On his final orbit, Gordon Cooper radioed a calm but urgent message. A luminous green object had slipped into formation with his capsule, matching speed and altitude over the Pacific. The onboard experiment camera captured it, yet the film reportedly returned overexposed when NASA processed it. Cooper stuck to his story for decades, even testifying before the United Nations that he'd watched a structured craft, not a meteor, slide away toward the dawn. NASA's official log simply calls it an instrumental anomaly. One minute it looked like a flying beer can, the next it vanished without a trace. While trying to nap, James McDivitt saw a silvery cylinder with antenna-like protrusions drifting past the cockpit. He grabbed a camera and snapped 2 hurried frames before the object accelerated upward into the sun's glare. Debunkers later suggested it was a discarded rocket stage, but the timings never matched, and NORAD's radar showed no known debris near Gemini. McDivitt, later manager of the Apollo program, maintained he'd seen hardware we didn't launch. Humanity's first moon crew may have had uninvited company. During the coast to lunar orbit, Neil Armstrong reportedly switched to the medical channel, less likely to be recorded, to ask what the transient lights were outside their window. Michael Collins later recalled bright points, quote, shaped like an open suitcase, rotating alongside the command module, prompting a quiet debate over whether they were ejected panels until the objects zipped off at right angles. NASA's public transcript never mentions the exchange, but declassified mission debriefs note a, quote, unresolved visual. The legend of Apollo 11's secret UFO whisper was born. Imagine filming space history and then your own footage becomes classified for decades. While maneuvering the spacecraft, Ken Mattingly caught something boomerang-shaped glinting in the 16mm camera. Analysts later said it was the detached T adapter from the lunar module, but tracking data placed that adapter 2 kilometers away on a different vector. The raw film vanished into NASA's archives until released in the 1990s. Independent frame-by-frame analysis showed the object make a subtle course correction, something no passive hunk of metal could manage on its own. 2 veteran astronauts agree. A glowing, tumbling nugget tailed them for 10 minutes. During a routine solar flare watch, Jack Loosma and Owen Garriott noticed a dull gold object with geometric facets keeping pace outside Skylab's dome port. Garriott confirmed its presence through binoculars. Mission Control asked for photos, but by the time the bulky film camera was aimed, the craft shot away straight through the station's forward attitude indicator, meaning the thing flew into the radar's blind spot. NASA filed the event as, quote, debris from prior launch events, even though no identified junk matched the trajectory. In 1965, the quiet town of Exeter, New Hampshire found itself at the center of an extraordinary UFO event that involved a diverse group of witnesses. This included local police officers and everyday residents. According to multiple reports, a bright, disc-shaped object appeared in the sky and executed a series of maneuvers that defied conventional aeronautics. What set this case apart was the willingness of local law enforcement to document and investigate the sighting, lending an unusual degree of official credibility. Despite exhaustive searches and numerous interviews, no trace of the object was ever found, and its sudden sudden disappearance only deepened the mystery. Our next case takes us back to the late 19th century in Aurora, Texas. According to local lore and sporadic newspaper reports from 1897, a mysterious object streaked across the sky and crashed in broad daylight. Witnesses claimed the impact left a smoking crater and remnants of an unusual metallic craft. While many dismiss this tale as folklore or a misinterpretation of natural events, its persistence in regional history makes it one of America's oldest UFO crash stories. Researchers note that the detailed accounts describing a loud explosion, strange noises, and even hints of an extraterrestrial design set the stage for later UFO narratives. Despite skepticism and a lack of physical evidence surviving to the present day, the Aurora incident remains an enduring mystery that continues to spark debate among UFO enthusiasts and historians. Heading to the Middle East, our next case unfolds in Tehran, Iran in 1976. During a tense period marked by political and military uncertainties, Iranian Air Force jets were scrambled to intercept an unidentified luminous object. Pilots reported that as they approached, their instruments malfunctioned and the craft seemed to emit a dazzling light that temporarily disrupted radar and communication systems. The incident was thoroughly documented by military personnel, and the pilots' detailed testimonies described a craft that moved with agility far beyond known aircraft capabilities. Although official explanations ranged from sensor glitches to atmospheric anomalies, many experts find these responses unsatisfactory. The Tehran UFO incident remains one of the most credible and confusing cases from the region, fueling ongoing investigations into whether advanced technology or something beyond our understanding was at work that day. Our next case takes us to the remote landscapes of Montana, where in 1967, an incident at Malmstrom Air Force Base left a lasting imprint on UFO lore. During this episode, military personnel observed unexplained lights near missile silos, and reports emerged that these mysterious phenomena coincided with temporary malfunctions of nuclear missile systems. The eerie connection between the UFO sightings and the sensitive equipment on board the base has led many to speculate about the possibility of advanced non-terrestrial technology interfering with human military assets. Although official statements have at times suggested sensor errors or natural phenomena, the precise timing and detailed eyewitness accounts from trained personnel make the Malmstrom incident one of the most serious and disturbing cases in UFO history. For many, the idea that such encounters could potentially impact national security only works to deepen the mystery. In 1987, the quiet surroundings of Akita Prefecture in Japan were shadowed by an encounter that left locals both terrified and intrigued. Multiple witnesses, including local police officers and residents, reported seeing a bright metallic craft that hovered silently before accelerating out of sight. The incident was particularly striking due to the detailed descriptions provided by those on the scene. Accounts noted precise, almost military-like maneuvers that defied conventional aeronautical behavior. Japanese authorities conducted investigations, yet the official records remain inconclusive, and many aspects of the event continue to puzzle experts. The Akita UFO incident not only highlights the global nature of these unexplained phenomena, but also reinforces the idea that such encounters can occur anywhere. Quiet rural regions are not immune to witnessing the extraordinary.
Number 10's Ryan Graves. For those of us who keep our heads deep under a rock as possible, such as myself, Ryan Graves has been breaking the internet recently with his very vocal claims of UFOs, going as far to say that he saw them every day in his time as a Navy pilot. Now, the dude is no foil hat freak. He comes packing your usual high qualifications and certifications needed for this role. So Graves is a former Navy pilot and engineer, chairs of America Institute Aeronautics and Astronautics UAP Integration and Outreach Committee, and now the founder of the new nonprofit Americans for Safe Aerospace, which is like Mothers Against Drunk Driving for our atmosphere. Graves chose to testify in front of Congress last month about how he feels these UAP, which is the boring version of a UFO, are actually a threat to our security and safety. So in April of 2014, his FA-18 squadron was on a training mission, and he said after achieving 12,000 feet in what's an exclusive naval airspace, i.e. nobody can fly here zone, two jets crossed the threshold to find, and I quote, a dark gray cube inside of a clear sphere, motionless against the wind, fixed directly at the entry point. He goes on to say that the jets, only 100 feet apart, zipped past the object on either side. The pilots had come so dangerously close to something they couldn't identify that they terminated the training mission immediately and returned to base. Ryan Graves said that the flight leader, in extreme duress, told him, I almost hit one of those damn things, man, in the pilot's ready room, and that we all knew exactly what he meant by those damn things, as they'd been plaguing us for the last 8 months. Having had this harrowing and potentially deathly experience, should things have been slightly different, Graves felt the need to develop a reporting service for pilots who come across these unidentified flying objects. Shedding light on a huge amount of investment that goes into the training of commercial pilots, Graves questioned the government for turning its back on the UAP reports, even though they all come from credible eyewitnesses. Number 9, which is the 2022 H0219. So, unlike America, Canada actually does have a UFO entry database for pilots. It's called KDORS, and it'll document anything from unruly passengers on flights to birds getting sucked into engines to aliens, apparently. As long as it's causing a problem and it's in the air, KDORS wants to know about it. Now, Transport Canada, despite having a reporting service for such things as UFOs, still cautions that reports contain preliminary, unconfirmed data that can be subject to change. And 2022 H0219 is the KDORS case number assigned to an incident that took place on September 17th of 2022, when an Air Canada flight from Toronto, quote, reported passing an unidentified object approximately 10 feet above the captain's window while making a left-hand bank at 1,300 feet just an hour before sunset. The report continues to mention that the flight crew couldn't identify the object, which is confusing seeing as it's 10 feet from the captain's window, and they went on to land without further incident. Now, the report wraps itself up with that, and trust me, if you visit the KDORS log, it's vague at best. But now you have a bit more context as to why they have that subject to change warning on their website. I'm not saying they would casually omit details, but you really think something was 10 feet away from the pilot and the airline's attendants' faces and they couldn't ID it? On to number 8, which is 2022 02794. Another KDORS flight sighting. So, there is quite literally no shortage of them. According to CTV, from unidentified objects to strange lights, Canadian aviation officials receive at least 16 unusual reports in 2022, including 11 from pilots flying for Air Canada, WestJet, Virgin Atlantic, United, and more. This report was made by NAV Canada on November 12th of 2022. It was a cargo freighter flying from Chicago to Frankfurt, Germany overnight. The route taken brings the pilots right overhead northeastern Ontario, where good things grow. The KDORS document, which was entered a few days after the incident, states that the pilots reported seeing lights that were moving eastward at the same speed as the aircraft while flying in the dark. Now, there's no further information on this one, but I sure wish there was. Number 7 is a break from KDORS reports. It's going to be the racetrack. So, veteran pilot Chris Van Voorhis told the Daily Mail of a strange encounter he had had in which 3 to 5 bright objects flew in a circular motion like a racetrack for hours on end over top of the Pacific Ocean in August of 2022. Their racetrack seemed to stretch from Honolulu to Los Angeles and then back. Similar to Graves, the 63-year-old Voorhis ain't some random dude in a tinfoil hat. He's racked up over 32,000 hours of flight experience working with multiple airlines, and when he witnessed this awe-inspiring yet decidedly creepy phenomena, Voorhis said that he was hit with an onslaught of other airline pilots radioing in to ask if he was seeing the objects as well. Apparently, as he told Daily Mail, about half of his pilot friends have seen some type of anomaly in the sky. They had to be in a very, very high orbit, or actually even in space quite a ways away from anything that a satellite would be, because every time we were seeing it, it was in the lower right-hand corner of the Big Dipper, no matter where we were in the world, he told the outlet. It lasted for such a long time that it actually became boring. Almost. Van Voorhis's employer, whose name is withheld, forbade him from speaking about the incident. However, that hasn't kept him from running his mouth, claiming to have also seen 3 flying discs in a triangular formation back in 2004. Number 6 will be the letter response. After tackling the dragon that is paywalls, I was able to scrape together the details of a letter written by Art Sabowski, entitled A Pilot Explains UFOs for the Last Time. Now, to save you guys some time and the paywalls, Art's letter is essentially him complaining that he spent 45 45 years as a pilot and hasn't seen boo. And all his pilot friends haven't seen anything either, therefore no pilot could have ever seen anything ever, and if they have, they're either Mary Jane smoking or visually impaired. Essentially, you could title his letter, "I am mad other professional aviators have seen something and I haven't." Now the whole argument of if I haven't seen a thing, therefore it does not exist is pretty much the argument of UFO non-believers. This is why Ralph Lowinger was quick to fire back a response. So UFOs don't exist because you and your friends haven't seen one? I know they exist because I was a co-pilot of a Pan-American cargo flight with 5 crew members who clearly saw their formation. It was on a crystal clear moonless night over Nova Scotia's south coast, and we all watched and saw the same thing through different panes of cockpit glass. Their dance was from another world. It lasted 5 minutes and terminated with the most dazzling feat of aerodynamics we have ever seen. I have now retired to the largest fly-in community in the world, in which many highly trained observers know that UFOs are real, cataracts and floaters aside. Lowinger and other crew members never reported their sightings, but their story did come to light in 2011.
On September 3rd of 1965, 18-year-old Norman Muscarello was hitchhiking home along Route 150 in New Hampshire. Around 2 a.m. he saw 5 bright red lights hovering above the trees. At first he thought they were police or fire lights, but when he got closer he realized the lights were coming from a massive object around 80 to 90 feet wide, but somehow was completely silent. Panicking, he drove into a ditch and watched in horror as this object started moving toward him, before changing direction and hovering over a nearby farmhouse. Norman ran to a neighbor's house for help, but he got no response. Eventually he flagged down a car and was driven to the local police station, where he told Officer Reginald Toland about what he saw. Toland was already familiar with Muscarello and he took him seriously. He radioed Officer Eugene Bertrand to investigate, and when they went back to the sighting location, the object did appear again, hovering silently and rocking back and forth. The officers just stood there completely stunned, not knowing what to do, before the thing disappeared. After the police reported the incident, the Air Force investigated, but their helpful explanation was that it was just stars or a military exercise. Muscarello and the officers weren't so convinced, nor are a lot of people who've heard about the story in the years since. In 1961, Betty and Barney Hill, a couple from New Hampshire, became one of the most famous cases of alien abduction. After a vacation, they were driving home when they noticed this strange light in the sky. At first, Betty thought it was a falling star, but it moved erratically and it was getting larger and brighter. Eventually, Barney decided to just pull over so they could take a look. As they watched, Betty saw some sort of craft with multicolored lights moving across the moon. They continued to stare for a while, but what happened next nearly gave them a heart attack. Suddenly, the craft dropped down toward their car and just hovered above it. Barney stepped out and, using binoculars, he looked up to see a bunch of what he said were humanoid figures inside this craft. One figure seemed to communicate with him telepathically, warning him to stay where he was. Terrified, Barney ran back to the car and the couple just sped off. As they drove away, they heard a strange beeping sound, and then they lost track of time, suddenly finding themselves near Concord hours later than they'd expected. When they got home, they noticed other odd things too. Their clothes were damaged, their watches had stopped working, and there was a strange pink powder on Betty's dress. The Hills couldn't explain what had happened, and both underwent hypnosis sessions later on, which revealed eerie, consistent memories of an alien abduction. On December 1st, 1987, a retired police officer known only as Spencer to the press was out for a walk in Ilkley Moor in England. While climbing a small hill, he saw a strange figure ahead of him, about 4 feet tall, dark green, with an oversized head and long, thin arms. The figure made a gesture that seemed to warn Spencer to stay back, but instead he took out his camera and he snapped a photo. The creature then ran off. Spencer followed but lost track of it in the fog. That's when Spencer saw a craft rise from the moor. He said it had 2 saucer-shaped parts stacked on top of each other, and that it hummed loudly as it disappeared into the sky. At this point, Spencer decided that his walk was over and he started heading to town, only to realize he was hours later than he should have been. His compass was also pointing in the wrong direction. In the days that followed, Spencer reached out to UFO researchers Jenny Randles and Peter Howe. The photograph Spencer took was examined by experts, and while it couldn't couldn't be proven to be fake, it was also too grainy for any real conclusion either. According to UFOologist Nick Redfern, Spencer was also visited by two men in black who apparently intimidated him into staying silent. On the night of August 21st, 1955, in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, a bizarre incident took place that has gone down as one of the craziest cryptid reports of all time, at least that I've read about. A group of 12 people who'd been staying at their small family farm rushed to the local police station saying that they had been under attack by small, alien-looking creatures. They claimed these creatures were about 3 to 4 feet tall and were peeking into their farmhouse windows and doorways, and that they'd been fighting them off for hours. And this all happened after they saw some weird light descend into the trees by the farmhouse. So two adults, Elmer Sutton and Billy Ray Taylor, described seeing short, dark figures popping up and even tried to hold them off with gunfire. Soon police, state troopers, and military personnel from nearby Fort Campbell showed up to investigate. What they found were signs of gunfire and holes in the farmhouse's windows and door screens, but no sign of any creatures. The following day, the family packed up and they left the farmhouse. The mysterious creatures were never seen again. November of 1979, Robert Taylor, a forestry worker from Scotland, had an encounter that left him badly shaken and injured. Taylor had gone for a walk near Dutchmont Law, a wooden area in Livingston, when he'd claimed to see a strange flying dome. He described the object as a large metallic sphere about 7 yards in diameter, hovering above the ground. It also had a rough sandpaper-like texture and small propellers on its rim. According to Taylor, the thing sprouted smaller spheres, which he compared to sea mines, that started dragging him toward the larger object. Then everything went black. When he came to, the strange craft and smaller objects were gone. Taylor tried to start his truck, but it wasn't working, so he walked home. When he got home, his wife was in shock. Taylor was disheveled, his clothes were torn, and he had grazes on his chin and thighs. The police were called, and after examining the site, they found odd marks in the ground, which Taylor said were caused by these strange objects. Finally, in November of 1980, Alan Godfrey, a police constable in West Yorkshire, was responding to reports of cattle roaming a council estate when he saw this strange diamond-shaped light hovering above the road. It was about 20 feet high and 14 feet wide, rotating slowly. He tried to radio for backup, but his equipment suddenly wasn't working. And then, just like that, the object vanished. Godfrey found himself 30 yards down the road. He was unable to explain where the last 30 minutes had gone. He also had a split boot and a strange red mark on his foot. Later, under hypnosis, Godfrey recalled being hit by a beam of light, causing him to lose consciousness. He remembered then waking up inside a room being examined by small, non-human beings and a more humanoid figure. Godfrey would later say it was possible the whole thing was a dream, but at the time, he felt very strongly that what he experienced was real. He also thought the experience led to his early retirement from the police force.
Number 10. Two white lights. Okay, so this didn't happen in the States, but Canada. And all I'm saying is that Biden could get some info out of Mr. Trudeau if he really wanted to. On January 29th, 2023, Canadian air traffic controllers and pilots couldn't identify two white lights moving in a circular pattern reported over Canada's Northwest Territories. Good evening, just wondering, do you got two planes that are just to the east of your field doing circuits or maneuvers? A crew member aboard the Canadian North flight headed to Yellowknife asked their traffic controllers. Negative, I have no reported traffic in the area, the Yellowknife air traffic controller replied. Do you have a visual on something? The crew responded somewhat hesitantly, yeah, we're looking at two lights dancing around here to the east of your field. They're above us, about I don't know what. We're not seeing them on TCAS, traffic collision avoidance system, but we can see the lights moving around. Then there's a pause before the crew member radios back to say, we're not crazy. No, we believe you, the air traffic controller replies, and the sighting remains unexplained. I need answers, people. Why are there just two random lights in the sky? Number 9. Over New Mexico. On February 21st, 2021, a pilot flying
over New Mexico at an altitude of 37,000 feet, reported seeing a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast over the top of them, according to the published audio. American Airlines confirmed that the radio transmission came from Flight 2292. The FAA a few days later stated a pilot reported seeing an object over New Mexico shortly after noon local time on Sunday, February 21st, 2021. FAA air traffic controllers did not see any object in the area on their radar scopes. Seems like air traffic control can never see these objects, but the pilots can, and I can't tell if that's better or worse. Number 8. Shot down object over Alaska. On February 10th, 2023, aka like a month ago, the US military shot down an unidentified airborne object over northeastern Alaska. US officials said they believed the object to be a balloon, but couldn't confirm it since it broke into pieces after hitting the ocean, the New York Times reported. How convenient. News outlets owned by the Chinese Communist Party said Biden's response has shown the world how immature and irresponsible the US has been in dealing with this case. Oof, even other people are criticizing him. Number 7. Shot down object over Lake Huron. On February 12, 2023, just 2 days later, a US F-16 jet shot down an unidentified object over Lake Huron. An octagonal object with strings hanging from it was detected over northern Montana, Wisconsin, and the upper peninsula of Michigan at 20,000 feet. This was believed to be the same object tracked over Montana and monitored by the government the night before. Melissa Dalton, Assistant Defense Secretary of Homeland Defense, and General Glenn Venherk, head of U.S. North Command, say officials could not definitively assess what the objects were, so they acted out of an abundance of caution to protect U.S. security and interest. These most recent objects did not pose a military threat, but their path and proximity to sensitive DoD sites and the altitude that they were flying could be a hazard to civilian aviation and thus raise concerns, Melissa said. Operations are underway with multiple agencies, including the Coast Guard, to gather the object's remains and determine where it came from, they added. And when or if they figure out what it is, I wonder if they'll actually tell us. Probably not though. Number 6. Rosemount UFOs. A man living in Rosemount said he encountered a similar UFO on 4 separate occasions. On August 4th, 2017, the man was near his Rosemount home when he saw what he described as a black object with bright orange lights coming from the craft and flying over the area. Nearly a month later, on September 6, 2017, he saw 3 crafts with the same description hovering above downtown Rosemont. 2 days later, a singular craft returned to Inver Grove Heights, and he spotted the craft one last time on March 12, 2018. The man took photos or videos for each of the events and submitted it to the Mutual UFO Network. Seems like these aliens could have been stalking him, which I think is even more creepy.
Next up, we have the very first record of a UFO encounter to take place in New England, USA, which I bet you didn't know was actually a major hotspot for extraterrestrial UFO and UAP activity, that's unidentified aerial phenomena, for those of you who don't know. The first recorded sighting happened in Boston, New England, and it was also the first ever documented sighting in the US as a whole. It took place in 1639, and credible reports have been popping up ever since. The record was a second-hand observation recorded by colony founder and governor at the time, John Winthrop, who wrote that a sober, discreet man had seen the sky above Boston become illuminated by a green light while he was rowing his boat along the river one evening. The light was still for a moment and appeared to be flaming, and then it morphed its shape and darted off into the night sky towards Charlestown. The encounter lasted for 3 hours, with the object in the sky going higher into the air and then rushing down closer to Earth again and again, back and forth. By the time it ended, which it did when the object just disappeared into the night, the man along with his boatmates had traveled 1 mile upstream with absolutely no memory of how they had gotten there.
This next one has to be the wildest alien encounter case in recent history. So in March of 2023, something strange went down in a small Bolivian village called Jorania. It all started with reports reports of a mysterious green light hovering in the sky. People whipped out their phones to capture the event, having no idea what the hell they were looking at. But unlike a lot of your typical UFO cases, this one doesn't just end with people seeing something strange in the sky. Things get way weirder. So 2 days later, residents claimed to have seen tiny beings darting around the town at night. One villager, Rita Marquez, described them as little and almost like goblins. Some locals even claimed to have found one of these small creatures dead in a gutter one morning, only for its body to vanish soon after. So, a lot to unpack here. Strange lights, possible aircraft, little beings running around the streets at night, and even a mysterious disappearance of one of these dead creatures. I don't know what to make of this case. Whenever there's a whole bunch of witnesses like this, I find it very interesting though.
Next up, we have Barney and Betty Hill's extraterrestrial encounter, which took place on September 19th of 1961 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where the couple claimed to have been abducted by aliens. The ordeal started when the pair saw a bright light in the sky around 10:30 p.m. while driving home after a night out. Betty asked Barney to stop the car so that they could get a better look. He did, and then pulled out a pair of binoculars. What they saw was a massive, oddly shaped spacecraft with multicolored lights. They tried to drive away, but the spaceship, which they believed to have been at least 40 feet long, followed them, getting closer and closer until it was hovering directly in front of the pair's car. Barney claims he was able to clearly make out 6 to 8 humanoid figures standing on the ship who instructed Barney and Betty not to move, but rather to just keep looking towards the ship. The next thing the pair remembered, they had driven 35 miles away from their destination with no recollection of doing so. They tried to write down as much as they could about the experience on their way home, but their memories quickly became fragmented. It wasn't until years later, under hypnosis, that the pair separately both recalled being taken onto the ship and then separated from one another and examined by the humanoid alien life forms. In the days after the incident, however, both Betty and Barney's watches stopped working, and Barney noticed tiny, circles on the back of his truck, and when he put his compass near them, it went haywire. So, I'm not saying they were telling the truth, but I think they might have been telling the truth.
This next story is very outlandish, but it's an entertaining story, and I haven't talked about it before, so here it goes. Back in 2021, Angelina Lynn Johnston held a news conference in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Johnston claims to be a former retired defense intelligence officer who had an encounter with various alien species at a secret base in the Mojave Desert. She claimed that in January of 2010, a few years before she ran as a Democrat candidate for South Dakota Senate, she had met up with a couple in South Carolina who ended up taking her to this secret base. She didn't provide details on exactly where the base was in the desert, but said that she would be taking an astronaut along with a few scientists to the base, which had been built into the side of a mountain. She described seeing various alien species, including one that looked a bit like a praying mantis type creature, and that the beings all spoke to her through telepathy.
Next up, we have the Exeter incident, which took place in Exeter, New Hampshire in 1965 and actually inspired a best-selling novel, Incident at Exeter: Unidentified Flying Objects Over America Now, by John G. Fuller. Not sponsored. One evening in Exeter, a police officer patrolling Highway Route 101 stopped to check on a woman parked on the side of the road. When he asked her what was wrong, she answered in breathless hysterics. She claimed that a large red flying object with flashing lights had been chasing her. Just a few hours later, the police heard a similar story from another man, a hitchhiker who claimed to have seen 5 bright lights in the sky while walking along Route 150. He told officers that they had been about 100 feet away from where he had stood, and he watched as they hovered over a home before moving over to the airspace above a large field, and then disappearing and reappearing several times. Curious, one of the policemen went with the hitchhiker back to the spot where he claimed to have seen the UFOs, and sure enough, there it was. And another officer arrived shortly after to see the exact same thing. 5 bright lights high up in the sky disappearing into and reappearing from the trees over and over again. And then, over the next few weeks, authorities in Exeter received almost 60 other reports of UFO sightings in the area. So, if you like aliens and UFOs and Exeter was not on your bucket list, you might want to rethink that decision.
Finally, we have a case where 3 UFOs hijacked a pilot's plane in midair. This is about as disturbing a close encounter as it gets, as this man just narrowly escaped death. The pilot's name is Carlos de los Santos. In 1975, he'd been flying back to Mexico City. It was just another routine flight until it wasn't. Carlos spotted something on his right wing. It was this silver disc-like object about 13 feet in length. It was just right on top of the wing. Then he saw an identical object on top of his left wing. And as if that wasn't enough, a third object appeared, and this one was heading straight for him. In a panic, Carlos tried to steer his plane away, but the controls weren't responding. Luckily, the object just missed him though. He frantically radioed air traffic control, explaining that he'd lost control and was surrounded by these strange disc objects. And then, to his complete and utter horror, the plane suddenly veered completely off course. It was now ascending higher and higher up into the sky. Carlos had absolutely no control over the plane now. But then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the strange objects flew away. And miraculously, thankfully, Carlos regained control of the aircraft.
Number 10. Triangle object. The Defense Department has confirmed that leaked photos and videos of an unidentified aerial phenomenon taken in 2019 are indeed legitimate images of unexplained objects. Photos and videos of triangle-shaped objects blinking and moving through the clouds were taken by Navy personnel, Pentagon spokeswoman Sue Go said in a statement to CNN. She also confirmed that photos of 3 unidentified flying objects, one spear-shaped, another acorn-shaped, and one characterized as a metallic blimp, were also taken by Navy personnel. As we have said before, to maintain operation security and to avoid disclosing information that may be useful to potential adversaries, DoD does not discuss publicly the details of either the observations or the examinations of reported incursions into our training ranges or designated airspace, including those incursions initially designed as UAP, she said. She also said that the Identified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, created to investigate UFO sightings observed by the military, has included these incidents in their ongoing examinations. Number 9. Drone footage. On April 19, 2023, the Pentagon released another video featuring MQ-9 drone footage from the Middle East depicting a UAP. In the footage dated July 12, 2022, which the US Defense Department shared online, the US military's MQ-9 Reaper drone, somewhere in the Middle East, exactly where wasn't disclosed, can be seen monitoring a strange metallic silver orb-like object flying around below it at some seemingly high speeds while the drone's camera tries to follow it. This footage is significant because while there have been previously declassified US military footage of UFOs, those were all taken by pilots in manned aircrafts. This one, however, was taken by a drone. However, this isn't the only time this particular UFO has been seen. Apparently, there has been many other sightings of a strange metallic orb in the Middle East. Sean M. Kirkpatrick, director of the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, told a Senate Armed Services subcommittee that it resembled a small metallic orb. He added there isn't an explanation for, but the reason for is due to lack of available data. It is going to be virtually impossible to fully identify that just based on that video, he said, according to ABC News. Number 8. ADAR. The Pentagon's new Office for Investigating Potential UFO Sightings received hundreds of news reports in 2022, and while it can explain more than half of these events, a sizable chunk remains a mystery. Within the new batch of sightings, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and the Office of Director of National Intelligence say they're focusing on some 171 cases, including some in which objects appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities and require further analysis. Since it was formed last summer, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office has received 366 reports of UAP. That total reflects 247 new UAP reports and another 119 that occurred before March 2021. 2021, but hadn't been included in the earlier report. The new numbers indicate a steep rise in UAP sightings. Now, the report released in June 2021 lists just 144 reports covering a 17-year period. With the subsequent additions, 510 UAP reports were in their files at the end of August 2022. Officials say they believe the rise in UAP reports is due to the US government's effort to destigmatize the topic of UAP and instead recognize the potential risks the phenomenon poses, both with aviation hazard and potential advisable activity, such as foreign surveillance efforts. Number 7. Dancing lights. On January 29, 2023, Canadian air traffic controllers and pilots couldn't identify two white lights moving in a circular pattern reported over Canada's Northwest Territories. Good evening, just wondering, do you got two planes that are just to the east of your field doing circuits or maneuvers? A crew member aboard a Canadian North flight headed to Yellowknife asked air traffic controllers. Negative, I have no reported traffic in the area. The Yellowknife air traffic controller replied, do you have a visual on something? The crew responded somewhat hesitantly, yeah, we're looking at two lights dancing around here to the east of your field. They're above us about I don't know what. We're not seeing them on the TCAS, traffic collision avoidance system, but we can see lights moving around. Then there's a pause before the crew member on the radio back say, we're not crazy. No, we believe you, the air traffic controller replies, and the sighting remains unexplained. Number 6. Over New Mexico. On February 21st, 2021, a pilot flying over New Mexico at the altitude of 37,000 feet reported seeing a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type thing moving really fast over the top of them, according to published audio. American Airlines confirmed that the radio transmission came from flight 2292. The FAA a few days later stated, a pilot reported seeing an object over New Mexico shortly after noon local time on Sunday, February 21st, 2021. FAA air traffic controllers did not see any objects in the area of their radar scopes. Seems like air traffic can never see these objects, but the pilots can, and I can't tell if that's better or worse.
Moving on to number 5. People have been hurt. So according to Grush, not only have there been some pretty sneaky cover-ups as well as some shady treatment to those who come forward, but people have also been harmed and threatened in order to not reveal information. Grush details that as a former intelligence officer, he would go to jail for revealing classified information, but when he was asked whether anyone had been harmed or injured to cover up information about extraterrestrial technology, he answered yes. Now, that alone is scary enough, but even more wild is that when he was asked if anyone had been killed, he said he had, quote, directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities. Now, I get it, he can't say yes or no because it's classified and all, but that's kind of a creepy answer. Feels like he's trying to tell us yes without telling us that. Now, on the other hand, a spokesperson for the Pentagon, Sue Gao, told NBC News that Grush's claims are false, but I mean, I don't know, man. What do you guys think? Coming in at number 4. Sightings are not rare. According to former Navy pilot and executive director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, Ryan Graves, it wasn't just the 2004 incident that raised some eyebrows. Graves also talked about an incident with a flying object off the coast of Virginia Beach in 2014. He said that while flying an F-18, he came across an aircraft that looked like a, quote, dark gray or black cube inside of a clear sphere. Which sounds pretty UFO-y if you ask me. Graves estimated the aircraft to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter and unlike any aircraft he has ever seen. But even more peculiar than its shape was that Graves claimed the UAP could remain stationary despite hurricane force winds. And according to Graves, sightings like this one are not rare, are not isolated. Plus, he explained that his squadron submitted a safety report at the time, but that he received no official acknowledgement of the incident. Moving on to number 3. A very small amount get reported. Now, despite the fact that Graves claims sightings are not rare, and the fact that it feels like there is always a new UFO sighting popping up, officially speaking, there are apparently not very many sightings that actually get officially reported. Graves estimates that roughly 5% of UAP sightings are reported. Again, mostly due to stigma. Quote, "I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issues this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are a concern for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies. It is long overdue." So hopefully this whole situation means more sightings will be reported following the hearing. I guess we will have to wait and see. Moving on to number 2, they really are more advanced. Back to retired Navy Commander David Fravor. I touched a bit in a previous point about his 2004 video he captured, but we're actually gonna circle back because there is a little more. Not only was this small tic-tac shaped flying object flabbergasting because they didn't know what it was, but according to Fravor, quote, "there were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any visible flight control surfaces like wings." Plus, Fravor explained that as he and the other pilots tried to get closer to the mysterious craft, quote, "it rapidly accelerated and disappeared right in front of our aircraft, leaving behind no detectable turbulence." Which essentially means whatever it was and whoever created it has far more access to superior technology than we do here on Earth. Fravor said, quote, "I'm not a UFO fanatic, but what we saw with our 4 sets of eyes, we have nothing close to it. It was incredible technology." Similarly, Grush alleged at another time that the military had misused funds allocated for other programs to try to reverse engineer some of the supposedly non-human technology. And last up in our number 1 spot, there are still unanswered questions. While there was certainly some juicy deets revealed at the hearing, we were also left with even more questions and still a few skeptics. Representative Eric Burleson of Missouri said he found it far-fetched that an extraterrestrial species was technologically advanced enough to travel to Earth, yet is, quote, "somehow incompetent enough to survive Earth and crash." NASA also weighed in, saying that scientists have been searching for signs of life in our universe for years, but they have so far come up short. The space agency's missions have studied water on Mars, explored the ocean worlds, Titan and Europa, and looked for molecules that could be a sign of life in the atmospheres of alien planets, but claim that our understanding of life is still a bit fuzzy and ever-changing. Now, all of that being said, as per the Planetary Society, it is, quote, "very unlikely that Earth is the only home to intelligent life." So, we may be onto something here. I guess we'll just have to wait and see until more information is revealed.
Over the decades, eyewitnesses, military personnel, and even scientists have encountered bizarre phenomena in our skies that defy easy explanation. From early encounters that helped kick off the UFO craze to modern-day mysteries with lasting unanswered questions, each story challenges our understanding of what might be soaring above us. Today we're counting down 10 of the most bizarre UFO sightings ever recorded. First up on our list is the Kecksburg incident that occurred in 1965 in rural Pennsylvania. On one crisp autumn day, residents witnessed a fiery object streaking across the sky before crashing into the dense woods near the town of Kecksburg. Eyewitnesses described the object as acorn-shaped and made of a strange metallic material. What's even more intriguing is how quickly authorities swooped in, cordoning off the area and removing any evidence. Despite explanations ranging from a meteor to a secret military satellite, the abrupt removal of the supposed craft and conflicting witness testimonies have only deepened this mystery. The Kecksburg incident remains a highly debated event, with many convinced that it was no ordinary piece of space debris, but rather evidence of something far more extraordinary. Heading to the American Southwest, our next point centers on an encounter in Socorro, New Mexico in 1973, a case that remains one of the most credible UFO sightings ever recorded. Local police officer Lonnie Zamora reported a close encounter with a mysterious egg-shaped craft that landed briefly near his patrol route. Zamora's account is particularly compelling because he described detailed observations of the craft's structure and behavior, noting that it emitted a powerful, almost magnetic glow and left scorch marks on on the ground. His report was taken very seriously by both military investigators and UFO researchers who found that the physical evidence at the scene corroborated his story. This incident continues to be cited as one of the best documented examples of an unexplained aerial phenomenon, challenging conventional wisdom and inviting ongoing debate. In the vast expanses of Texas near Duncan, a routine drive turned into a nightmare on a warm day in 1980 for three individuals: Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and Colby Landrum. They encountered a diamond-shaped craft emitting intense heat and a strange, pulsating glow. As they approached, the object released a burst of energy that not only scorched the nearby ground, but also exposed them to what they described as high levels of radiation. The physical injuries and lingering health issues reported by the witnesses lent a terrifying credibility to the event. Despite extensive investigations, authorities have been unable to conclusively explain what occurred that day, leaving the Cash-Landrum incident as one of the most unsettling and medically documented UFO encounters. Next, we travel to the skies over Alabama in 1948, where commercial pilots Wiley Childs and his co-pilot Whitted experienced an encounter that would soon spark widespread curiosity. While cruising at altitude, they observed a bright, saucer-like object following their aircraft, executing maneuvers that no conventional plane could match. The object darted away at impossible speeds, leaving behind a trail of questions rather than answers. Although the incident was initially brushed off as an optical illusion by some, the pilot's reputations and detailed accounts have ensured that this encounter remains a significant piece of aviation and UFO lore. Its early date and credible witnesses continue to invite debate about what the pilots really saw that day. Venturing into the rugged wilderness of Manitoba here in Canada, we encounter the infamous Falcon Lake incident of 1967. While exploring near Falcon Lake, Stephen Michalak came face to face with a glowing, cigar-shaped object that descended from the sky. As he drew near, the craft seemed to radiate an intense heat, and he later suffered unusual burns on his chest and hands, injuries that defied typical explanations. His physical evidence, including peculiar markings and radiation-like effects, has been thoroughly documented by local authorities and independent researchers. The Falcon Lake incident stands as one of the most chilling examples of direct human contact with an unknown aerial phenomenon, raising enduring questions about the nature of that encounter. A flash, a zero-G dance, and a hard right turn at 20,000 miles per hour captured on live feed. Night vision cameras tracking an Aurora experiment caught a small, luminous object darting across frame. A bright flash, possibly thruster plume, triggered the object to change direction instantly. Then a second object shot in from below. NASA later said they were, quote, ice particles reacting to RCS jets, but physicists noted the maneuver would require a sudden acceleration high enough to liquefy any ice. The uncut video leaked, sparking one of the first internet-age UFO debates, still unresolved. Ever see a flying saucer 3 times the size of Earth's radius? Astronaut Story Musgrave watched 2 gigantic self-illuminating discs drift just below the shuttle while Columbia was 190 miles up. They appeared on multiple cameras, expanding as if growing, before fading into Earth's limb. NASA blamed lens reflections, but veteran engineer Mark Carlotto's pixel analysis showed parallax motion inconsistent with glare. Musgrave, a 6-time shuttle flyer, now tells lecture audiences he's convinced intelligent life is out there and STS-80 is why. 6 bright lights in a perfect row flew under my boots, then vanished. While installing navigation antennas, ISS Commander Leroy Chiao spotted a horizontal line of lights racing across the dark ocean below the ISS, speed around 17,000 miles per hour. Ground controller suggested shrimp boats off Brazil. Chiao dry laughed. He was 220 miles up and the pattern matched neither cities nor storms. He reported the sighting but never received an official follow-up. Years later, when asked if he he'd seen a UFO, he answered, quote, "I saw something I couldn't explain and no one ever tried to." A Soviet hero meets a silent cruciform craft, then the tape disappears. While approaching the malfunctioning Salyut 7 station, Vladimir Zanabikov filmed a cross-shaped object rotating end over end 50 meters off his port window. He assumed it was lost hardware until it halted mid-tumble, cocked 45 degrees, and darted behind Salyut in a blink. The cosmonauts whispered that it, quote, "looked back at them." Soviet controllers ordered the film canister returned by secure diplomatic pouch, and to this day, no frames have ever been released, and Russia's archives list the reel as, quote, "missing." When a decorated Navy SEAL calls something in space weird, you pay attention. During lockdown-era orbits, Chris Cassidy spotted a metallic dog-bone-shaped object drifting near the station. He filmed it on his phone and radioed the sighting. NASA later said it was a small bracket from a recent Progress resupply, except inventory showed all brackets accounted for. Cassidy's video reveals the object making a slow roll, then a tiny puff of vapor jets it sideways before it slips out of view. NASA clipped the maneuver from the clip released to news outlets, citing, quote, "privacy of operational data."
Number 5 will be the skydiver. So this story comes out of the Virginia pilot Julius Figueroa in July of 2022. Julius had served in the Navy as a pilot for 2 years before getting a job in the Midwest as a skydive pilot. What would be considered an everyday venture, loaded up with his usual adrenaline junkies trying to touch the clouds, Julius and his passengers experienced a different kind of adrenaline-invoking experience. We were climbing 10,000 feet, and at around 4,300 feet, I was looking into the distance and this thing caught my eye, Figueroa said. It started getting closer and it was approaching me about 15 feet to my left heading north. Figueroa goes on to say that the object was spherical golden orb that was flying very fast, but interestingly, he reported that you couldn't see the object when you looked at it directly. Other pilots have reported the same thing during their encounters, and it does sound like an explanation for what happened even in our first story, where Graves' team didn't notice the flying anomaly until they were about to crash into it. Julia said that the object was the size of a small car, and without realizing it, he started turning his plane to the left. As the object passed by, Figueroa said he started yelling, causing the other people in the back of the plane to look out the window. 3 of the skydivers see it, including one of the instructors, Figueroa says. By the time I turned the plane, it was already on the horizon, and shortly after, the object was gone. Figueroa contacted air traffic control and asked them if they'd seen a drone on radar, to which they said they didn't. He called again and described the object he saw and asked if they had seen it. To quote him, "There was a long pause on the other end, and then they said they didn't see it." Number 4 will be the Passover, and not the one with the matzah and the karpas. I'm still full from the last one. I'm talking about the weird and very underdocumented occurrence from June of 2023 in which a pilot in Toronto reported, and I quote, "seeing a person in a wingsuit flying at an altitude of 13,000 feet. Now, articles did mention that this incident was filed with Transport Canada. However, even after spending hours searching KDORs, I was unable to find a report or provide a case number. But to give you an idea why this reporting is so weird, aside from everything about it, A, who uses a wingsuit nowadays? And B, this altitude actually breaches the death zone. For those of us who don't climb Mount Everest in our free time, the death zone is to refer to the point at which an altitude's lack of oxygen becomes insufficient to sustain human life. The average person tends to die around altitudes of 8,000 feet and higher, and it's all attributed to the physical capabilities of cellular oxygenation. So what does that mean? Aliens. Number 3 is gonna be our last CADORD report of the list. It is 2022-1004. Where? Kitchener-Waterloo area. For my viewers outside of Canada, it's a few hours drive from Toronto, Ontario, and it's a lovely little college town chock full of frat boys, geese, and hockey. And now, apparently, their new claim to fame is that there's some aliens all up overhead. During the daylight hours of May 28, 2022, local police were notified after multiple reports were received by local traffic of unidentified object, possibly a balloon or a radio-controlled plane, at 3,000 feet and 7 nm south of Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario. It's incredibly frustrating trying to pursue more knowledge or information on this sighting, as unfortunately its documentation is limited to what I just told you. You'd think there have been so many witnesses and reports between pilot and citizens alike, perhaps there'd be more statements. What I did learn, however, is since Ontario kept popping up for these sightings and I was curious, is that according to 2022 numbers, Quebec led all provinces with about 29 39% of all Canadian UFO reports, narrowly edging out Ontario, who has 28% out of the total recorded 786 sightings in our country. Number 2 is the Tic Tac. Remember Ryan Graves and how he testified to Congress? Well, he's not the only one who did. During a hearing before the House lawmakers, retired Navy fighter pilot and Commander David Fravor testified about his experience seeing what he described as a tic-tac looking object while on a flight back in 2004. Commanding the FA-18F squadron on the USS Nimitz, he and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich were on a flight off the coast of Southern California on November 14th of 2004 when they saw a flying object. The advanced radar on the ship was part of their training group and detected what operators called multiple anomalous aerial vehicles over the horizon, descending 80,000 feet in less than a second. Fravor and Dietrich swerved over that way to investigate, each carrying an extra witness, the weapons system officer, in the backs of their jets. Fravor recalls the experience. I said, dude, do you see that thing down there? And we saw this little white tic-tac looking object, and it was just kind of moving above the whitewater area. Fravor went in for a closer look. He described the tic-tac object mirroring his movement, saying it was aware we were there and that all 4 of us in the airplanes literally were watching this thing for roughly about 5 minutes. The object was about the size of Fravor's FA-18F, with no markings, no wings, and no visible exhaust plumes. When Fravor tried to cut off the strange flying anomaly, it accelerated so quickly it seemed to disappear. He said it was detected roughly 60 miles away less than a minute later. I think what we experienced was, like I said, well beyond the material science and capabilities that we had at that time, that we have currently, or that we're going to have in the next 10 to 20 years. And coming in at number 1 will be the 7. So this ex-FBI agent named Ben Hansen is now the host of the Discovery Plus TV series UFO Witness. He works hard to try and bring attention to UFOs, and in doing so collects worldwide reports and videos he can share that are as credible as possible. He compiled accounts from pilots from Southwest Airlines, Hawaiian Airlines, and others between August 6th and September 23rd of 2022. And in the captivating account we'll be discussing from this time period, a former military pilot reported seeing multiple aircrafts flying above him. Pilot Mark Hulsley was flying a charter jet on August 18th of 2022 off the coast of Los Angeles when he suddenly radioed in the following: "We've got a few aircrafts to our north here, and he's going around in circles, much higher altitude than us. Any idea what they are?" The confused controller responds, telling the pilot he's not sure. Hulsey then calls back 23 minutes later to say that the 3 aircrafts he had originally reported had now increased to 7, flying between 5,000 and 10,000 feet above him in a regimented pattern. While the controller continues to dismiss him, we hear the anxiety spike in Hulsey, who's absolutely adamant, stating in the recorded footage to the controller that they just keep going in circles. "I was an F-18 pilot in the Marine Corps, and I'm telling you, I've done many intercepts, I've never seen anything like this." According to Hansen, the strange lights that some pilots reported as possible aircraft were seen by upwards of 15 different commercial flights, and that at least 6 pilots are willing to go on record with their names and everything if asked to do so by any investigative agencies. According to Hansen, it means in this case we have a global phenomena as far west as Japan to as far east as possibly Miami. Whatever it is, these pilots are seeing it from halfway across the world. Hansen said there's no official protocol for reporting strange sightings for civilian pilots because they don't think the FAA will follow up, or worse, they will be ridiculed. But as we know, Ryan Graves is working to change that.
Number 5. Navy pilots. Recently, 2 former Navy pilots were interviewed by 60 Minutes on CBS News about a UFO sighting over the Pacific Ocean in 2004. Commander Dave Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich spotted the unidentified object during a training exercise, but were unable to classify it. Dave described it as a little white tic-tac looking object, adding that it lacked conventional exhaust plumes and had no wings or visible markings. It also moved erratically, the pilot said. In an interview with NBC News, Dave described the 2004 encounter, calling the object the strangest, most obscure thing I've ever seen flying. As soon as we look down, we see the white water, and then we see this little white tic-tac. It's pointing north-south, and it's just going forward, back, left, right, he said, adding that it was bouncing around like a ping-pong ball. Dave said he approached the mysterious object to take a closer look, and it began mirroring his movements. Then, when
the pilot decided to get within half a mile of the UFO, it suddenly vanished. I'm surprised the government even let them do this interview, but my question is, if he did get closer, what were they gonna do? Wave hi to the aliens? Number 4. Multiple objects in the sky. Ryan Graves, a former Navy pilot who testified that he witnessed unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAP, with his own eyes, and he called on President Joe Biden to investigate the mysterious objects spotted in American airspace. Ryan, a former fighter pilot, explained that after 2014, when upgrades were made to our radar system, our squadron made a startling discovery. There were unknown objects in our airspace. And these were not mere balloons like the Chinese spy balloon that dominated the country's attention in February. These were no mere balloons. They could hold their position, appearing motionless, despite Category 4 hurricane force winds of 120 knots. They did not have any visible means to lift or control surfaces. In other words, nothing that resembled normal aircraft with wings, flaps, or engines. These are not isolated incidents, Ryan said. We have a real UFO problem, and it's not balloons. The point is that we don't have as clear as an understanding of what's above our heads as we thought we did. There are uncertainties up there that we have to deal with. If we don't do it, our adversaries are going to take advantage of that uncertainty, that weakness, to spy on us with various means, as we've seen. It's pretty clear. If there are things over our head that we're not sure what they are, we need to figure it out. If they're adversarial, it's a national security issue. We have mechanisms for that. If it's not a national security issue, and if it's not an adversarial platform, then it's a matter for scientific inquiry. Not gonna lie, this scares me a little. Number 3. Leaked video. A leaked Navy video captured in July 2019 showed a sphere-shaped unidentified object flying over water near San Diego. The footage, obtained by documentary filmmaker and shared with NBC News, appeared to show the mysterious object flying for a few minutes before disappearing into the water. The video was captured by a Navy aircraft and recorded in the USS Alma's Combat Information Center, according to filmmaker Jeremy Corbell. The clip appeared to show a spherical object flying above the water for a few minutes near San Diego before it just vanishes. It splashed, military personnel can be heard saying in the video. The Defense Department confirmed that the clip was recorded by Navy personnel and said that it will be reviewed by the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, a panel established last year to gain insight into the nature and origins of such objects. Number 2. You saw something you shouldn't. In 2008, a large aircraft hovered above Stevensville, Texas. Many people in the community saw it, and according to the Mutual UFO Network, a pilot named Steve Allen reported that the unusual aircraft was flying at an estimated 3,000 miles per hour and was being chased by fighter jets. Then a man named Rick Sorrell said he saw the same thing while hunting. Later, Rick said a strange man knocked on his door and said, "Son, we have the same caliber weapons you have, but we have more of them. You need to shut your mouth about what you saw." Creepy. Was this the men in black, people from their government, or real aliens? Who knows, but if that happened to me, I think I'd move out of state. And coming in at number 1 is the Pentagon. The Pentagon's new Office for Investigating Potential UFO Sightings received hundreds of news reports in 2022, and while it can explain more than half of these events, a sizable chunk remains a mystery. Within the new batch of sightings, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and the Office of Director of National Intelligence say they're focusing on some 171 cases, including some in which objects appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities and require further analysis. Since it was formed last summer, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office has received 366 reports of unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAP. That total reflects 247 new UAP reports and another 119 that occurred between March 2021 but hadn't been included in an earlier report. The new numbers indicate a steep rise in UAP sightings. The report released in June 2021 listed just 144 reports, covering a 17-year period. With the subsequent additions, 510 UAP reports were in their files at the end of August 2022. Officials say they believe the rise in UAP reports is due to the US government efforts to destigmatize the topic of UAP and instead recognize recognize the potential risk the phenomenon poses, both as an aviation hazard and potential adversarial activity, such as foreign surveillance efforts. I don't know though, it seems like they're really starting to believe in aliens to me.
From 4 men on a camping trip being followed by a beam of light, all experiencing intense dreams of being experimented on by alien beings, to police officers having their whole squad cars engulfed in strange lights from the sky and forgetting huge stretches of time. These are terrifying alien abduction stories governments tried to cover up. In August of 1976, 4 men went on a camping trip in the Allagash Wilderness in Maine. Jack and Jim Weiner, along with Chuck Rack and Charlie Foltz, were off on what was supposed to be this peaceful getaway when things took a turn. On their second night, Jim spotted a bright object in the sky. It was there for about 30 seconds, then it disappeared. Not super out of the ordinary in the deep woods, the sky is just lit up with stars at night, easy to misidentify things, but 2 nights later, while they were out fishing, the same bright object appeared a second time. Chuck noticed it at first. It looked super intense. This time it was almost like the sun, they said, and they watched it as it followed them along the water. Charlie, thinking it was some kind of signal, even tried to flash an SOS to the object. And that's when things got really weird. They described this light shooting a beam down towards them, which followed them all the way back to shore. And when they got back to their campsite, something else was off. The fire they'd left burning was completely out, and they felt totally exhausted, like they'd been gone for hours. The next few days were uneventful, and they didn't see the light again, but after they got back home, the men started having these disturbing nightmares, often about sitting naked on a bench, feeling afraid. That night stuck with the men, but it wasn't until 1988 that they finally had enough and decided to seek out answers. Jim reached out to UFO researcher Ray Fowler, and they all agreed to undergo hypnosis to try and make sense of these strange memories. And under this hypnosis, each man recalled being abducted by aliens. They described terrifying beings practicing medical exams on them, even having their skin and bodily fluids taken. Later, when they compared notes, they realized that their memories matched up exactly. They even passed polygraph tests. On the night of October 11th, 1973, in Pascagoula, Mississippi, 2 men, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, had a terrifying encounter they were never able to explain. While fishing off a pier by the Pascagoula River, they heard a strange whirring sound and saw flashing blue lights. Next thing they knew, an oval-shaped object about 30 to 40 feet across appeared above them. They were completely paralyzed as 3 bizarre creatures with robotic, slit mouths and crab-like pincers took them aboard the craft. Once inside, Hickson and Parker claimed the creatures performed some kind of examination on them. They both stayed silent for years about the details, but Hickson eventually opened up, even writing a book in 1983 about the encounter. Parker was quieter at first, but started attending UFO conventions, and in 2018, he released his own book, giving his side of the story for the first time. In 2019, the site of the abduction was marked with a plaque to honor the event, and Parker, deeply emotional, said he wanted to be buried there someday. Hickson passed away in 2011, but Parker continued to speak about the encounter until his death in 2023. Of course, some say the 2 made this story up, but what if they didn't? What if something actually happened to these 2 men that they were never able to forget? And writing it all down and sharing their story with the world was their only way of working through something that they couldn't even begin to understand. In 1979, Deputy Sheriff Val Johnson from Marshall County, Minnesota, had a strange encounter while on patrol. On the night of August 27th, around 2 a.m., he saw a beam of light just above the road near Stephen, Minnesota. The light shot toward him and engulfed his squad car. Johnson reported hearing glass breaking before losing consciousness. When he came to, 39 minutes had passed. The car's windshield was shattered, one of the headlights and the red emergency light were damaged, and the radio antenna was bent. When backup deputies arrived, they found Johnson's squad car sideways on the road. He had bruises and eye irritation, which a doctor later compared to burns from a welder's torch. When Johnson's story came out, it gained a lot of attention. All it did was make matters worse, though. Johnson would later say it, understandably, caused a lot of emotional distress for him and his family. Till this day, nobody knows exactly what happened that night, but part of me wonders if he just got into a car accident and was too embarrassed to admit it. Not to ruin the party or anything, but I don't know. What do you all think of this one? This next one is really weird, so strap in. So in 1957, a Brazilian farmer named Antonio Villas-Boas had one of the craziest nights of his life. On October 15th, while working late in the fields, he spotted this bright red star-like object in the sky. The object came down, eventually landing. It was an egg-shaped craft, and from it came these humanoid figures. They were about 5 feet tall with small blue eyes and white hair, and they were dressed in what looked like these gray overalls or equipment, and they had these helmets on. Before he knew it, Antonio was grabbed and taken aboard the craft. Once inside, the aliens took samples of his bodily fluids and performed a whole series of other medical examinations. Then they led him into another room, where he was introduced to a female humanoid, according to him a very attractive one. He described her as having small round eyes, white hair, and a human-like appearance. And after some strange interactions, well, you can guess what happened next. And once the bizarre encounter was over, the craft released him back into the field and took off. Antonio, understandably shaken, eventually told his family about it. Not sure how that conversation would have gone, but I'm gonna assume it was awkward. His story soon caught the attention of the Brazilian military and the media. People had a lot of questions. Some thought his story was incredible, some just laughed him off, but Antonio stuck by his story all the way up until his death in 1991.
Close encounters with UFOs, something I always wish that I could experience.
Maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
Here's hoping.
You have.
Yes, I have. I didn't include that on this list though. Again, I've missed an opportunity, so maybe next time. But there's a lot here worth listening to.
Diving into. Let's do it.
Starting off our list today, we have a 2018 UFO sighting that took place in the skies above North Carolina. Shout out to anyone watching from Elon University. In August of 2018, a man named Javion Hill claims to have spotted a UFO while driving home on US 74 just southwest of Charlotte. He described seeing lights in the clouds above him, shaped like a square. Immediately, he pulled out his phone and began snapping photos, which I have to admit are pretty convincing. After hovering in the sky above Javion for a good amount of time, the illuminated formation just vanished into thin air, as they do. You know how it is. It was as though it had never existed in the first place, but of course it did because there's proof, and we've seen it. And Hill, who says he was never a believer in aliens before that night, claims that during the time in which the object was hovering above him, he was seriously concerned for his safety.
On June 24th, 1947, Kenneth Arnold, a private pilot, saw something in the sky near Mount Rainier in Washington. Something that he couldn't quite explain. He described 9 strange crescent-shaped objects flying in a V formation. What really caught his attention was how fast these things were moving, at around 1,700 miles per hour, which was faster than any known aircraft at the time. And when Arnold reported what he saw, it ended up getting massive media coverage. The Kenneth Arnold sighting is often referenced as the first big UFO encounter in modern times. After Arnold's sighting, lots of other reports started coming in about strange things in the sky across the United States. The government and military were getting intrigued, and the US Air Force started Project Sign, which was the first official government investigation into UFOs. This later became Project Blue Book, which looked into thousands of UFO sightings to try and figure out what was going on. So is it just one of these cases where he saw something and then everybody else started like getting excited and, just thought they were seeing things? Or was this just the time where UFOs and aliens were starting to come down to investigate things here on Earth?
Next up, we have 2 commercial pilots on different aircrafts claiming to have seen a mysterious flying object in the sky while flying above Arizona on February 24th of 2018. The first pilot to spot the UFO called into radio traffic control to ask if another plane had passed by him. The controller answered no, and then went on to make a joke about the pilot having possibly seen a UFO. Ground control then contacted another pilot flying an American Airlines flight a little bit behind the first plane and asked the pilot to inform the control center if an aircraft were to pass over the plane. And a short while later, the pilot did exactly that. He said that a fast object had flown 3,000 feet over his plane in the opposite direction of which he was going. Once again, ground control had no knowledge of the aircraft, and it didn't show up on any of the radars either. Both pilots later described the objects as illuminated and incredibly fast, saying that they were nothing like the weather balloons they had seen sometimes floating at that altitude before. Plus, there were no records of this object, so what could it have been? Well, a UFO, duh.
Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was the lead investigator of Project Blue Book in the 50s. His job was to investigate reports of UFOs and find any possible explanation for them. Of course, if there was none, it would be categorized as a genuine UFO. French had shot down a lot of UFO reports over the course of his career, but in 1952, he witnessed something himself, something he could only describe as a genuine alien encounter. He kept what he'd seen a secret for decades. It wasn't until 2013 that he testified before 6 former members of Congress in DC, describing an event that happened back in 1952. A number of residents off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland, had reported spotting 2 unidentified flying objects. So French was tasked with heading over to Canada to basically debunk it. The UFOs had crashed into the water, and when Lieutenant Colonel French arrived, he saw this crowd of about 100 people, including some police, standing by a wharf, gawking at something in the water. French made his way over, and when he looked down into the clear water below, he saw what looked like 2 large circular aircraft-like objects, and there were apparently 2 beings working on them. French described the creatures as, quote, 2 to 3 feet tall, light gray in color, very thin, long arms with either 2 or 3 fingers, the top of their heads much wider than their jawline. Their eyes were very slanted, and you couldn't see pupils in them. He then described the objects slowly rising out from the water before abruptly accelerating and taking off into the sky.
Number 5. The coin incident. At 7:30 p.m. on October 18th, 1973, American Airlines Flight 21 encountered a UFO near Mansfield, Ohio, and reported it. This would be the first of dozens of sightings reported in that area that night. However, the most astonishing one took place 3 hours later and became known as the coin incident. Sometime after 10:30 p.m., an Army Reserve helicopter piloted by Captain Lawrence Coyne and a crew of 3 men was flying from Columbus to Cleveland when somewhere around Mansfield they noticed a red light on the horizon. They then realized that the object was heading straight for them at a high rate of speed. Coyne quickly descended to avoid collision, but as the men were preparing for impact, the object came to a halt in front of them and projected a green pyramid-shaped beam over the helicopter. At the same time this was happening, the men reported the helicopter being pulled up towards the UFO. However, it then let go and darted out of sight. The incident lasted 5 minutes. The men described a gray metallic-looking dome-shaped object with a red light on one end and white light on the other. Now, interestingly, after the incident, according to one crew member, the helicopter never worked right again. Now, this whole incident was seen from the ground by a mother and her 2 children who pulled their car over to watch what was going on. They reported seeing the helicopter chasing an object they said looked like a blimp, pear-shaped and as big as a school bus. Number 4. Trumbull County UFO Incident. Featured on the History Channel and numerous UFO documentaries, the Trumbull County UFO incident in northeast Ohio is exceptional because it was witnessed by numerous police officers and a 911 dispatcher, all of whom were being recorded as they spoke back and forth about the strange events unfolding on the evening of December 14th, 1994. It was also seen by many members of the public as well. Now, around midnight, Trumbull County 911 began receiving calls from residents about a strange low-flying light in the sky. The dispatcher sent out Liberty Township police officers to investigate, and one of them was Sergeant Toby Maloro, who saw a light. He got out of his car and looked up to see what he described as a giant circular-shaped object and intensely bright in the center section. It made no sound at all, and the object was there for about 30 seconds before moving away. Shaken, the sergeant decided to chase the object, as did many other police officers in the area. In total, at least 14 law enforcement officers saw the object at night, with all of them discussing it openly on their radios. videos. Number 3. Navy pilots. Recently, 2 former Navy pilots were interviewed by 60 Minutes on CBS News about a UFO sighting over the Pacific Ocean in 2004. Commander Dave Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich spotted the unidentified object during a training exercise but were unable to classify it. Dave described it as a little white tic-tac looking object, adding that it lacked conventional exhaust plumes and had no wings or visible markings. It also moved erratically, the pilot said. In an interview with NBC News, Dave described the 2004 encounter, calling the object the strangest, most obscure thing I've ever seen flying. As soon as we look down, we see the white water, and then we see this white tic-tac. It's pointing north-south, and it's just going forward, back, left, right, he said, adding that it was bouncing around like a ping pong ball. Dave said he approached the mysterious object to take a closer look, and it began mirroring his movements. Then when the pilot got within half a mile of the UFO, it suddenly vanished. My question is, what was he going to do if he got closer? This whole story is just crazy. Number 2. Multiple objects in the sky. Ryan Graves, a former Navy pilot who testified that he witnessed UAP with his own eyes, has called on President Joe Biden to investigate the mysterious object spotted in American airspace. Ryan, a former fighter pilot, explained that after 2014, when upgrades were made to our radar system, our squadron made a startling discovery. There were unknown objects in our airspace. And these were not mere balloons like the Chinese spy balloon that dominated the country's attention in February. These are no mere balloons, they could hold their position, appearing motionless, despite Category 4 hurricane force winds of 120 knots. They did not have any visible means of lift or control surfaces, in other words, nothing that resembled normal aircraft with wings, flaps, or engines. These are not isolated incidents, Ryan said. We have a real UFO problem, and it's not balloons. The point is that we don't have a clear understanding of what's above our heads as we thought we did. There are uncertainties up there that we have to deal with. If we don't do it, our adversaries are going to take advantage of that uncertainty, that weakness, to spy on us with various means, as we've seen. It's pretty clear. If there are things over our head and we're not sure what they are, well, we need to figure it out. If they're adversarial, it's a national security issue, we have mechanisms for that. If it's not a national security issue, then it's not an adversarial platform, then it's a matter for scientific inquiry. No, I'm not gonna lie, this scares me a little bit. And coming in at number 1 is leaked video. A leaked Navy video captured in July 2019 showed a sphere-shaped unidentified object flying over water near San Diego. The footage obtained by a documentary filmmaker and shared with NBC News appeared to show a mysterious object flying for a few minutes before disappearing into the water. The video was captured by a Navy aircraft and recorded in the USS Amsa Combat Information Center, according to the filmmaker Jeremy Corbell. The clip appears to show a spherical object flying above the water for a few minutes near San Diego before it vanishes. It splashed, military personnel can be heard saying in the video. The Defense Department confirmed that the clip was recorded by Navy personnel and said it will be reviewed by the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, a panel established last year to gain insight into the nature and origins of such objects.
So starting us off at number 10, cover-ups. So this might not be news in regards to the idea of alien life and the government's involvement, as it's long been theorized by believers that the government has been covering up truths in relation to ETs and UFOs. But if we are to believe what was said in Congress, then that means the theory wasn't wrong. A former intelligence official testified last Wednesday that the United States government has found and covered up evidence of extraterrestrial life for decades. One of the witnesses, retired Major David Grush, alleged at a House of Representatives hearing about UFOs that the Pentagon has recovered crashed vehicles and biological remains believed to be of non-human origin. Quote, "I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program to which I was denied access. My testimony is based on information I have been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country, many of whom also shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony." So, yeah, and it only gets crazier from here. Moving on to number 9. caught on video. Now, as I mentioned, there were 3 military veterans that were a part of this hearing. We touched on David Grush in the last point, but the other 2 witnesses, Ryan Graves, Executive Director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, and retired Navy Commander David Fravor, both testified they too had personal experiences with UFOs while on the job. One of the more shocking incidents in particular detailed by Fravor was an incident from 2004, where a UAP was caught on video. Now, UFOs, or UAPs as they're formally referred to by military personnel, are defined as any object that is detected but cannot be immediately explained. And while some end up having innocent explanations like being weather balloons or drones, others remain quite the mystery. The 2004 incident falls into the latter category. Fravor said it was several years before any officials followed up on the extraordinary events of the day, and even then, he added that nothing was done. Moving on to number 8. There's a support group. Obviously, there was a lot of juicy information being revealed at the hearing, and I don't know if this was news to everyone, but it was to me, so I'm adding it. The former Navy pilot Ryan Graves talked about how he had founded the Americans for Safe Aerospace group that supports aviators who have reported UAPs, which might not sound like the craziest thing compared to what else was revealed. I mean, there are support groups for tons of different things, but to think that people are likely to require support after coming forward with unexplainable sightings is kind of crazy. Like, what is happening after they submit this report? What did they see? What did their superiors do to them? Graves stated that the objects that are reportedly being seen by military and commercial pilots are, quote, performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country. Further adding, quote, if everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. Moving on to number 7, fear of coming forward. So, branching off of my last point, during the hearing, much of the discussion centered on improving the process for reporting unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, but Grush was also there to promote removing the stigma for aviators who report UAP sightings and to ensure oversight of government programs that investigate them. The former intelligence officer told the panel that he and several other colleagues have been the targets of what he calls administrative terrorism, and that he has at times feared for his life since coming forward. Which, I mean, would make a lot of sense if that's true, why a support group was put in place for those who report UAPs. Quote, it was very brutal and very unfortunate. Some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, he said, adding that there is currently an open investigation into the matter. Moving on to number 6. Safety issues. One of the major arguments this hearing was intending to focus on was that in not reporting or in discouraging reports, we are creating a national safety issue. And there is a push for intelligence agencies to be more transparent about UAPs in order to promote national safety. Supporters of this, like Democratic Rep. Robert Garcia of California, said, quote, UAPs, whatever they may be, may pose a serious threat to our military and our civilian aircraft, and that must be understood. We should encourage more reporting, not less, on UAPs. The more we understand, the safer we will be. Grush, Graves, and Fravor all echoed similar sentiments, explaining they would like to see a, quote, safe and transparent reporting system. The men added that they are hopeful the public discourse is the first step towards eliminating the stigma and reports of UAPs to encourage others to come forward.